Welcome back to another edition of Whiteboard Wednesday. This is probably one of my favorite topics because it really gets into the concept of the work that salespeople do and how they can manage it more efficiently. And this is about sales efficiency even more than effectiveness because, and I've said this a lot, selling is really about the flawless execution of a lot of very, I would say, otherwise very simple things that have to happen consistently and over time, which is what drives the complexity. So managing the sales life cycle is really what gets at the core of what challenges salespeople to be successful. And I'll start out just by talking a little bit about, in my mind, what kind of stuff, and I love the word stuff, what kinds of stuff does sales do? Right, stuff's a technical term. So what is involved in the role of selling? What do salespeople do all day long? What are they involved in? What is required? And contrary to popular belief, I would say that selling really has three primary components. There's three things that salespeople need to keep track of, three major things, right? First and foremost is what I will call active, and we'll say late stage opportunities, right? The deals that we're trying to close, right? What's in the bottom of the funnel? What are we closest to opportunities? Sometimes you gotta phonetically do that out. This is our money pile, basically. This is where we're gonna make our money. So the first imperative for sales has to be to manage actual active late stage opportunities that we're trying to convert into revenue in a meaningful period of time. The next area that sales has to focus on is fairly simple: new prospects. And the term that's getting a lot of play out there right now is this concept of tofu, top of the funnel stuff, right? And we can all relate to that because when we fail to generate new tofu, no matter how many late-stage opportunities we have, no matter how much business we're trying to close, the lack of new focusing on prospecting as an activity is what creates inconsistencies in our pipeline, revenue peaks and valleys. And you'll hear me again and again just talk about how critical it is, and in a lot of respects, the only thing you can control is the amount of activity you put forth in the area of new prospecting, top of the funnel stuff. The last area that sales has to focus on is what I would just simply call all the other pipeline or funnel opportunities, right? So there's the stuff at the top, there's the stuff at the bottom, and then there's everything in the middle, right? So these are three very different work buckets, three very different categories of work, and the other thing that makes it difficult is they require different skill sets and different focus and different time allocations, and they do so at different times. So if I'm working to close at the end of a quarter or the end of a year, whatever your period is, a number of very significant opportunities that are going to make me money, well, of course that's going to detract from my prospecting, but I still need to do some of it. As my bottom of the funnel, BOFU, opportunities start to dry up, then I can reallocate and need to reallocate more new prospects. So one of the challenges, and I'll cover this in another issue, is that CRM as a technology is not particularly well suited in the way it's configured in most organizations to enable the workflow to support this different kind of life cycle situation, right? This dynamic work allocation that salespeople have to figure out how to do. So I've actually developed a system for this. I've actually developed a number of customizations within the CRM of choice for me, which is Salesforce.com, to deal with this. But first and foremost, you got to acknowledge that really, if you think about, there's three kinds of things we're going to be working on, right? And each of these probably represents more like a mode we go into, right? There's a prospecting mode, there's a closing and working my deals mode, and then there's kind of everything else in the middle mode. The question you got to ask is how do we make this sane and rational such that I can come in on a particular day and know that when I'm working in this area, here's where I go find that work, etc. And for most organizations, right, the primary means of managing work, right, how we manage our day are these things called tasks, right? Follow up with this, do that, etc. And again, those of you who follow my blog know that I'm actually absolutely adamant that task-based work is about the most inefficient way to manage stuff, because first and foremost, you have this concept of relative prioritization, right? You can assign tasks different priorities, but when we're going to our task list, we tend to pick and choose what we want. The second is the question of, it's non-time bound, right? So one of the biggest issues for tasks is, when do we do them? When we sit down and have time. So if our days are consumed with calls and meetings, etc., the time allowed for our task list is always going to be small. And if all of these activities live in our task list, then the chances are we're going to focus on our late stage opportunities close to money. The chances are even greater that we're going to neglect what is in our long-term interest. So the system I've come up with really relates to the fact that our relationship with our clients, our customers, our prospects, whatever, really does follow through, a life cycle of our relationship, right? It's not a static relationship, and you just think sort of high level. I won't go into the details. That people start as prospects, we may engage with them, they may go away, they may tell us we're not interested, they may come back, they may purchase, they may renew, they may want to upsell, but you can kind of get a sense of this life cycle concept that people and companies come into our lives, and it follows a very natural flow. So I'll give you the structure, kind of called the database schema, if you will, that I use to manage this, and then I'll provide a link down here to some articles and a document that shows you how I actually use this in Salesforce. So let's think about stuff from a data perspective, right? All of our customers, all of our prospects, everybody, represents a contact, an account, represents data to us. So on some level, somewhere in the organization, we have this repository of all my, right, customers and prospects, right? And frankly, that's the limit of how most people use CRM. It's simply a repository, a contact manager, and then I use tasks to decide who I talk to next. But I think we can do better, right? So let's just walk this through from a life cycle standpoint. As I come in on maybe day one of my new year, and I sort of think about, what should I be doing? If I'm starting with a clean slate. I want to take this to the physical world, even though we're talking about a database and we're talking about Salesforce.com as a CRM. But let's imagine that we're going to work from a series of folders, right? And one of the folders that I'm going to do is basically all my future potential that I've identified, right? I can't call everybody in my database. I can't focus on anybody, and there's some people I don't want to, but I need to identify a grouping of companies that represent my future potential. This could be from inbound leads, right? This could be from referrals. This could be from a trade show. Could even be from a cold list. Doesn't really matter, but I want to make sure that I can organize and know that certain folks are ones that I'm going to need to, get after someday. But at the same time, I walk into sales organizations frequently, and I see that the amount of prospects that a sales rep is tracking is far more than they can ever manage, right? It's regular to see 400 or 500 accounts in a salesperson's bucket or in a salesperson's account ownership. Well, how are you supposed to sort through those and determine, what you should really be doing and who you should be focused on, etc.? First and foremost, I'll say that for most salespeople, we want to limit the number of folks that we really are targeting within a period to 50 to 100 accounts. Now, take this with a grain of salt. This is absolutely going to depend on the industry you're in, on the average selling price that you have, how much inbound traffic, etc. But bottom line is you want to have a finite number that you believe you can manage, that you believe is going to meet your needs for a particular month, for a particular quarter, etc., whatever it is. But keep in mind, this is all of our future potential for a given period. The challenge is, how do I go about pursuing those folks in a way that I can get in the door and start to generate some opportunity, right? This is our top tofu bucket. So I need to distinguish further my schema here. I have to have all my future potential, and then I need another category that I can refer to as active prospects, right? People that I actually intend to and have the bandwidth to start to reach out to, right? Ultimately, selling, prospecting, as I say, is about converting from an interruption to a planned for conversation, right? A scheduled conversation. So prospecting is a very simple and straightforward activity, as you heard me talk about. It's a very critical activity in terms of, number 2 over here, but I only have a limited amount of bandwidth in a given day. I mean, how many outbound phone calls can you make in a day? How many emails can you send? Maybe the number's 100, maybe it's 20. But the point remains that I need to focus on the number of prospects that I'm going to be calling on at a given moment in time. Again, this is going to depend on size of deals you go after, the kinds of companies you pursue. It'll definitely depend on the number of buying roles that are typically involved in a decision. Right? If you're tracking 3, 4, 5 constituents at a particular company, well, that's going to affect the number of prospects. What I generally say is you want to make your active prospects list the folks that you can reasonably expect to call today. And I really mean call today. And as the rest of this framework plays itself out, I think you'll see what I mean. But prospecting is something we need to do every day. If I call you today and then I can't get around to my second call for 2 weeks and I call you 3 weeks later, regardless of lead source, that's not an effective prospecting methodology. Prospecting is predicated on consistent, focused effort. It's better to concentrate that effort on a narrower set of prospects than spread that out over many, many prospects. One of the not best practices that I see quite often is companies will have very rigid requirements about lead response or follow-up, meaning I expect my people to call or follow up on a lead that shows up within 24 hours. Well, that may represent a problem simply from capacity. What do you do when your lead volume is greater than the number of calls you can make in a day and still hit the persistence criteria? How many number of dials you want to make on a particular prospect? So lots to think about there. But generally speaking, these are going to move in this order here, and I can keep my big database here. I've got track of my future potential in another folder, but I want a very dedicated folder called future prospects. Well, as you've heard me say lots and lots of times, the goal of prospecting is to convert an interruption, a cold call, to a planned for conversation. So the most important folder, and I'll also say the most useful folder in my arsenal, is going to be those prospects that are, can you guess what it is? On my calendar, right? If you are on my calendar, and this is where I think the simplicity of the system really works, if you are on my calendar, then I really don't have to worry about creating a task to follow up. I really don't have to worry about what I'm going to do next. I've said a lot that selling is about interactions between two human beings, and my goal is always to drive conversations to a place in my calendar, more than anything, because I don't have to think about what's next, and I can move that account to my on my calendar folder. If you're sitting on my calendar folder, we have a conversation, and I schedule the next conversation. Where do you go? Well, you stay here. And the question, of course, is, well, how many folks should be in on my calendar folder? And the beauty of the answer is as many as you want, because your time is your most precious asset, right? It's your most challenging thing to manage. And if you're on my calendar, then I know I have a place for you, and I never worry about what I'm going to do next. So this, to me, is where things really get interesting. You're on my calendar. Now, all that obviously makes sense, and any one of these categories can live in the on my calendar world, so that's really good. But what happens if something goes awry, if you will, on the journey from my future potential to active prospecting is on my calendar, right? In the process of active prospecting, I might learn some things. One thing I might find out is that this particular prospect that I thought was future potential is not around anymore. Right? Maybe the company's gone, maybe they've been merged or acquired, maybe something worse. We call this category, sounds a little morbid, but dead. Call it dead. And this is one of those sort of final resting places, if you will, meaning if an account is marked dead, I never need to go back to it again. And in fact, if I have somebody else come in or I find a duplicate, I can match it against somebody that's dead and know that that's not worth even putting through my process. Funny story, a little while back, worked with a company that sold to financial planners, independent financial planners. So these were individuals who manage people's money and help you through retirement and all that good stuff. Well, the typical financial planner, as you might imagine, is not a young buck or what have you, fairly senior in experience and age, etc. We actually came across lots of circumstances where we would call on the prospect, the financial planner, to find out that they were in fact really dead, and as in deceased. So one of the things we'll talk about is the need for reason codes associated with these particular values. So if we move an account to dead, we want to understand why we put it there. So what else? If I'm talking to a prospect and I get into a conversation, I might determine that this particular prospect is not for me. And notice I'm not saying not interested in me, but somebody that I don't want to sell to. Could be they're out of my service market, could be they're a competitor, that would be a bad fit. Could be that perhaps they're too small, right? Maybe they don't fit my profile of my ideal client. I want to reject them. So I want to have a folder that allows me to take prospects that I don't think are a good fit for me. Again, notice I'm not saying that it's something that they don't want to do. It's something I don't want to do. And I might say I want to find a place for those. So those are pretty dramatic. What else can happen? Well, I'll tell you, one of the most common things that happens when we are prospecting, right? This should be pretty obvious, is that for whatever reason, either we can't get a hold of them in a meaningful amount of time, or I'm just going to call this in a big category, they're not interested for whatever reason. Could be timing, could be where they are in their budget cycle, could be a million reasons. Could be the fact that I just couldn't get through. There's lots of other reason codes here, but this is going to be the majority, if you will, of your prospecting effort, right? Or folks that we haven't determined aren't for me, are definitely not dead, aren't willing to schedule my calendar. But another way to think about this is, simply, not now, right? So not interested or not now would be another good way to think about that. This is going to be the majority of what you're dealing with out there. So pretty decent life cycle. Well, what happens on the calendar if I don't know, let's say something good happens, like we get a conversation, we are able to enter into the discovery process? Well, that's what we want, right? We want the concept of, advancing to the next step, and they're going to stay here when we create an opportunity for them, right? However, what I see oftentimes with salespeople is we advance in the sales process, we create an opportunity, we're working them, we maybe do a demo, we deliver a proposal, and we're actively working that prospect, but we don't get them scheduled, right? And this could look like a lot of things. It could look like, hey, just call us back next week. We need 2 weeks to think about it, and they're not willing to be in your calendar. Well, I'll tell you, this is not where you want to be, right? And this is a bad place, a bad folder, but I still need to keep track of it because it happens. Fundamentally, my goal is get them back to schedule, right? But if I can put my prospects in a folder that says, oh, this is somebody who was in the sales process, but just wouldn't agree to schedule, or I forgot to schedule the next meeting, then I've got a place to go and find that and pull it out of that dumpster, if you will. So pretty good framework. Hopefully that makes sense. Ultimately, if we get to the place where they're not interested or not now, we've got other options. We can follow up. This is also the land of, let's say, marketing, right? This is where we nurture prospects to bring them back into the sales process, right? We want to revisit them, etc. So this is a valuable conduit to our brethren in marketing. But ultimately, if we keep folks in our calendar to the point where either we generate revenue, right, or we have a closed lost. Probably writing off the page here. No, I'm good still. Right? One of those two, then what happens? Well, guess what? It all starts over. Right? If I've taken somebody through the sales process, regardless of whether they have been closed won or closed lost, whether they're customer or not, it all goes back into here. Ultimately, we're going to use the concept of not now or for later. We call this the recycle process, right? And they come through. So what I hope you're seeing, and again, this is a complex conversation. This is a different way of thinking about how we manage our work, right? Just simply setting aside the fact that we have, different kinds of work that we do, and it's pretty important to, understand both what zone we're working in and then also how we can manage different kinds of work and different volumes across, a lot of different paradigms. May be interesting, may not, but I'll tell you, in my world, the labels that I use and how we talk about this in Salesforce, I actually use the rating function of Salesforce, do some customization, and you can read about this in the article. Refer to this category as on deck. I refer to this category as pursuit. These are my labels. Refer to this category as dead. This category is disqualified, and this is the recycle that we were talking about over here. Talk about this category scheduled. So if you think about every account having a label assigned to it that says everybody that we deal with is going to be in one of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 categories, and they're going to move through that seamlessly. They can move from recycle back to on deck. They can move from recycle to dead if that's something happens, or disqualified, or from scheduled to recycle, or from scheduled back to pursuit if a meeting is missed. It becomes a very fluid environment, and hopefully closing the bow on this, as we come in the morning, come in the week, come in the month, what have you, to pursue our various works, every one of these phases we simply can go into our Salesforce or CRM, if you will, and in that particular work category, prioritize how we're going to go after it. Try to move them to scheduled. If I can't, make sure that I'm pursuing them to get the scheduled conversation, or moving them to let's talk later. So I hope this has been helpful. I'm sure I'll get a lot of questions on this. There'll be an article below that you can click to. It's called Triple Your Prospecting Output, and it really goes into this concept in more details, but I hope this helps you get your head around what's a really challenging task for salespeople, and that is managing ultimately the workflow across many kinds of work and serving our clients and prospects throughout a very complicated life cycle. Thanks a bunch for watching, and we'll catch you next time on Whiteboard Wednesday.